La, la, la.
Let me just get comfortable.
Okay, so we just went through a miniature, I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, I mean, we went through a power outage here where 18,000 homes suddenly went without power. And I immediately started, of course, thinking of myself and not, you know, the potential traffic accidents of traffic lights being out and all of the other ice cream trucks. Not, well, I guess ice cream trucks would be okay. But now, hey, Candy, let's make sure in the new studio we got a generator. All right. Okay, so we're going to do that. You have been extremely patient.
Not at all. I got to eat lunch, and believe it or not, a repairman came and went during that blackout and repaired my garbage disposal, which he told me to use more often.
Well,
anyway, you know, we once did.
Okay, go ahead.
We once did an entire show at Kimmel with when there was a blackout in LA. There was just enough auxiliary power or independent generator to run 2 cameras, but the lights were all like Coleman lanterns and things like that.
Yeah,
I thought there would have been more attention to that show than there was, but a lot of stuff Kimmel didn't get credit for in the first few years that he deserves some hats off.
Well, that certainly can be said for you guys too, as you're finding your voice and developing your audience. I mean, I love that Kimmel has creatively and wisely bringing you on board to help with things like this. You know, I think about the early shows of Late Night, the plane show, the show that turned upside down along the way, the little one-offs that you guys did, and the idea, the power going out, saying, okay, well, can we still? Yeah, let's do this. This is gold. Let's go ahead and do this. That's something that I would think is still ingrained in you.
Yes. Well, again, many of those premise shows, and by the way, it used to be a very tough sell to sell a theme show to Letterman. You know, they could go circus night. No, we're not doing circus night, you know, or Christmas in July. Well, maybe, you know, he just always felt quite wisely that once you've got the premise, and it's not going well, and then you're stuck with it for an hour, you know.
Sure.
But many of the effects were just like writers sitting dully in an edit room and noticing that you could flip an image or rotate an image. They were completely conventional things, but there was always the idea, very big in the Letterman, vision of making a mountain out of a molehill. Take something small and make it very, very big.
Absolutely.
Reverse image television.
Yes.
You know,
well, the things I loved about that, and maybe we can get into a little bit of your role as the writer. Okay, I want to talk about head writer versus not head writers. You hear that term all the time.
It does. You know, it does vary from place to place, and even within the Letterman show.
Yep.
I think there have been head writers that didn't do that much writing. I think the first couple head writers at Letterman were real writers. I always thought myself more as like a sergeant major or a squad leader,
right?
But always writing, because you not only did we need it, you needed every word, visual, syllable you could get.
Yes.
But also, it was just it was solidarity. Yeah. I was a writer, obviously, for about a year before I was head writer. And even then, the head writer promotion, I think, was out of desperation, because most of the staff at that point left to go to either Saturday Night Live or to another Lorne Michaels show. You know all about this.
Sure.
So there was a little bit of like, we'll promote the corporal to be lead the group.
Yeah.
But it worked out. I think I had just enough flexibility to work with Dave and also with the writers and back and forth. My job was partly to distill and edit so that it wasn't just, 7 writers yelling things at Dave and him making decisions. I would kind of go through and there were certainly negotiations within negotiations. Writers would go, I want to pitch the big red wig one more time. And I go, okay, I'll pitch the big red wig. We'll see what happens. I liked the job. And over the years, there would be, whenever the contracts would be come up again, they'd go, do you want a car service? And I'd go, no. That seems like more of a headache than a help. How about a producer title? And I was green enough. I went like, no, I hate most of the producers I know. I like being a writer. Head writer. What could be a better title than that?
Shout out to Barry and Morty. No, I'm kidding about that. I'm kidding.
No, I
I'm
do.
kidding.
I do have
totally
fondness.
kidding.
I do have fondness for both, and over the years have come to be, I think, a good friend with Morty, who is again the characters. They're
Yes.
all so distinct.
Yes.
I think when the hand of God intervened to cut off your podcast, you were about to speak about Shecky. There's another character whose name now is enshrined in most other late night shows, because whenever somebody says go to some old clip, they'll go to a Shecky clip or a Shecky footage. I'm not even sure they know that it originated with Rick Sheckman. They just think, oh, that sounds old fashioned, like, well, Morty, Shecky.
Yep.
All you need is a Dino. And sometimes there has been a Dino. Dino Stamatopoulos, I know, worked for a while.
We're gonna get to those. I think it's all those three of those names actually in a very beautiful speech you gave, and that's how we're gonna finish the show. Not to tell tales out of school, but
was this the one at Bunker Hill?
Wouldn't that be great if we had that one?
Yeah.
Oh God! Now we'd be cooking with oil if we had that one. Shecky, let's talk about Shecky, because we have talked a little bit about some folks who are behind the scenes that have been encouraging me, and I again am convinced it's not a practical joke. And Shecky is one of those guys, and so whenever I have a guest on, and here's a guy that I go to for some sage-like advice. He and I both connect on many levels. This is one of the guys. So I asked him, I said, do you remember the first time you met Steve? And it wasn't the first day of your or his first day on late night. And
yes,
so that
would have been my guess, but only knowing Shecky and his hobbies and interests and inclinations, I'm going to wonder. I had two jobs immediately before Letterman. One was at the Museum of Broadcasting, which seems like a very Shecky place to go to, and the other was in the NBC tape library. And I wonder if it was in either of those capacities that I might have met Mr. Sheckman.
So which one was it where if he wanted a piece of footage or the sum up of a show, he would go and talk to somebody and they would give him a card that would sum up what happened on that show, Jack Benny or something from the very past?
It could have been either one, actually.
There you go.
There you go. Probably the NBC tape library, though, because that was the job, which actually made a difference in I don't know if it made a difference, but it did figure in the day that I was hired, because the tape library was in 30 Rock, where 1410 West, the Letterman offices were. And I came back from some dreary recap of some prime time, Harper Valley PTA show or something. Sure. And there was just a Post-it note. If you remember Post-it notes, they were these sticky.
Yes.
That just said, Meryl Marco phoned, can you come over to her office? She wants to talk with you. And I just ran from the 24th floor down to the 14th floor and presented myself to Meryl. And she seemed quite astonished, and then said, Don, which was one of the pet names or code names or nicknames for Letterman. He came into the office and said, how did you get over here so fast? And I said, I work in the building. And I got the note that Meryl wanted to see me, and I decided to eschew the return phone call and just come directly. And of course, Letterman said, eschew. Did you hear that, Meryl? We got a real writer here. We're going to get our money's worth. And then I went back to my office, but I wasn't sure I got the job. I never said, we'll see you next week, but I did get a call the next day from some NBC lawyer who said, you'll get $1,000 a week. And at that point, I felt like, holy, that would it was like, you are going to live in a castle made out of ice cream, and you will ride in a car shaped like a swan. And, no, it was quite fantastic. But that was again, just the dizzying secondaries. Yes. The main thing was how wonderful that they liked my submission and my drawings enough to hire me. That part was wonderful. And then there was the terror of, now I must do this every day and they're going to find out what a fraud I am. But it actually took them 10 or 12 years to find out what a fraud I was. So luckily, I had enough momentum going there to get along. But
I wasn't going to bring up the mental health thing at all here in this particular podcast, but I'm going to now because you know, I normally save that for Altman, but I'm gonna bring it up now because there's a group around locally that's a little bit excited about what's happening here with the Letterman podcast. Just it's kind of a curious thing that a guy from Western Canada is undertaking this thing, and it's actually starting to do some things. And the documentary is called The Unlikely Host of the Letterman Podcast. Now, you bring up something here. Yeah, so that's happening, it looks like.
No, that's fantastic. But
it is.
But make an observation?
Please do. Please do.
It is a little bit about personal styles. In a way, you have an opposite style from Letterman, or at least a highly contrasting style.
Yes.
One of the things that attracted me right away, I mean, you both seem intelligent, and he seemed very smart, but also very, skeptical and kind of holding back and kind of askance, like not sure how legitimate television was. And that was extremely attractive to me and fascinating. You are very Dale Carnegie kind of upbeat, hooray, live every moment.
Without a doubt.
Both of these
people
are
almost
legitimate approaches to the universe, but I find it marvelous that they could harmoniously sound without being identical.
Well, here's an analogy that might not ring true for everybody that's above my age group, but there was a hip hop group in the late 80s and early 90s that I'm a big fan of from New York called Public Enemy. There and they had two members. They had Chuck D and Flava Flav, and both were essential parts of the act. Chuck D, of course, the serious wordsmith activist who seriously was very serious at the task at hand, including entertainment being one of those tasks. And then you had Flava Flav, who was the band's favorite, biggest cheerleader, had to know everything, but at the same time, the completely juxtaposed, if that's used correctly here. But the documentary it's about imposter syndrome. It literally is what you're talking about here. You talk about the 12 years of them waiting for you to feel like, oh God, they've discovered me. Now I'm okay. That's actually what the documentary is about. And it took me, I had the opposite moment that Dave or I don't know what your moment is. I'd love to hear your moment. Dave truncates his experience into a moment in a communications class in high school where he didn't know what he was going to do, C student. And then suddenly they're like, okay, communications class, stand up. Talk about yourself for 3 minutes. Oh, I can do that. I didn't have that moment until I built a family and a modest financial firm, but good with dealing with people. I didn't have that moment going, oh shit, this is what I want to do. I didn't have that moment until I was in my 40s, and I'm 46 now. And so the documentary is actually going to be about imposter syndrome, and it's hopefully going to be one that inspires folks. And trust me, everybody, I'm segueing right back into Steve O'Donnell here, and I'm going to maybe embarrass him a little bit, unfortunately. I don't want to do that.
I'm already embarrassed.
Okay, here we go. But it's going to be about, hey, go chase it. Go after it. The person who's there already, guess what? They're just as qualified as you are, maybe just more experienced or have a little bit more knowledge, but you go whatever you want to do, go do it, because it's we got one life, and let that little voice that's saying that you're not the one, beat the crap out of that voice. Because I can tell you right now, Steve, if this is number 16, 17, 18, whatever it is, if it ends tomorrow, if I get a cease and desist letter from Worldwide Pants and they're like, you know what, we're going to make your life really tough if you keep doing the show, I've already won. And that's going to be the crux of the documentary. Everything else is cake. And I hope that there's a bakery's worth coming, but it's all there already. Now, this being said, I want to talk about inspiration and how, if you want, this was going to be my intro, everybody. Just so you're aware, we started the podcast on purpose the way we did. We did not intend for the power outage. Other forces gleefully helped us out with that. Normally, I do an introduction where I basically edify the guests to the point where they want to go under the table, because I'm so grateful and so impressed with who they are. Here's what I was going to say for Steve. if you, now again, don't do this now. That would be ridiculous because it would mean you have to stop the podcast now. And we don't want that. So before you do this, finish the podcast. Then like the podcast, then share the podcast with every person you know, especially people you don't like, because that'll be a little gift for you. Get that all done. Once you're done doing that, jump onto the YouTubes, okay? There's a lot of moments that Steve O'Donnell wrote and whatnot early on that are on the official channel and on Giller's channel. But there's something else I want you to see first. I want you to go to the place where Steve gives the acceptance speech for the Herb Sargent Award. It is one of the most, like, I used to fancy myself as a fairly decent public speaker that would even attempt to put the word clever into my accolades of how I would describe myself. And then I watched this speech. Steve Young brought him up. David Letterman sent in a video clip, all to congratulate and celebrate Steve O'Donnell's accomplishments. And I'm not going to let you interrupt me right now because I'm going to finish it. Steve, clever and entertaining. Then Steve shows up and gives, in my opinion, the greatest acceptance speech ever told because of entertainment factor, insights, delight. And also, I don't think he ever actually accepted the award because he then went and made the award about all these other amazing people that he has worked with, all of which, and Kellison alluded to this in his episode, all of which would consider Steve, I sit at the mount of the master person who inspired them. And yet Steve goes up there to accept this. I don't know if there's a higher award in comedy. There aren't many for writing, and accepts this award and makes it about everybody else. And how many people out there, Steve, did you help them get over the imposter syndrome, place that we get to mentally? That was going to be my intro for you right there. Now you're still here, so thank you.
But, well, thank you. I mean, that is beyond extravagant to the lavish. And first of all, there's many much better speeches. There's one that same evening, about 40 minutes later, John Waters was given an award by the Writers Guild, and his speech is the best. It's fantastic. The second thing is, I'm not really a speech maker, and with every sort of problem you have, I always think, how can I thought the easiest thing to do was deflect attention,
Sure.
Just also, there were so many great writers, and some that were just, I could have gone on for great length about any individual one of them. Chris Elliott, I could have given a 2-hour seminar on, but also just writers in general. I think I might have mentioned in the speech, they're the best and the worst, and comedy writers in particular. And also just that I've worked with former male strippers and with, former cops and, former lawyers, that have gone into comedy writing. It's inspiring. It's interesting. And also people that have really paid dues at every step of the way. There are people, and I'm sort of in between this way. There are Harvard Lampoon people, and I was such a one, and that was a privilege and a help. Yeah. But I had half a decade go by before I had a television job. There are other people that step right into things. And then there's people like a Rodney Dangerfield, or I have a couple of other friends who started writing in midlife and have made a go at it. Oh, I want to, on the sort of sweetness of Letterman.
Yes.
And also how darn quick and clever he is. After 20 years, I didn't really see him or speak to him much at all. There was a long gap between like mid-90s and 2015. Mm-hmm. It's like 2 weeks or so before his very last telecast of Late Show. And I had just called up and said, could I just come up and say hello? And thank you and stuff like that. And his assistant said, yes. And I came up, we sat there for like 2 hours. But the little funny moment that pertains to your documentary,
is right there.
The funny moment, yes, that pertains to your documentary. When I hadn't laid eyes on Letterman in 2 decades, he comes out and I go, hi, Dave, there's not really a very good reason for me being here. And he said, "Come to that, Stephen. I don't have one either." And we laughed over it. You know, it's kind of my justified humility and his kind of higher contrast humility. But it was fun, and we had a very nice conversation. And I will also say that a certain amount of self-doubt and self-examination is probably good, because I think you've got to keep checking yourself. Absolutely. But there is you also have to keep your eye on what you're good at and what is the thing you do probably, you know, better in your own way than anyone else. And when the Letterman show was starting up, I had that feeling about that. Like, I can do this, and if they don't see that I am just right for them, then they're crazy. But turns out they weren't crazy, or they were crazy in some other way. But they did see the aproposness. I mean, it was a thing I wanted to do more than anything else in my life. You have high school guidance counselors. Maybe you get into this kind of thing. Absolutely. Tell you, find that thing you love and go do it. I was never quite sure what it was. I liked cartooning. I liked writing. I liked history. I liked music. Yep. But most of the job decisions I made were like sort of 75%. Like, yeah, I guess so. But the Letterman job was something I wanted 100%.
There's a commonality with everybody. Like, I think about how many of people that I've already talked to, you know, Kellison and Tommy Ruprecht being the two that come to mind immediately.
Oh, two good guys.
Absolutely. Came up through the intern program. And I think about guys later on like Brian Tetta, who came along, became interns, and got careers out of it, literally chasing their dream job by coming in there to do the thing for free as an intern at first, for the love of the game, not for any other reason other than a reckless abandon, not necessarily leading to a career, but oh my God, I want to intern for Letterman more than anything. I will pay to do that job. You know, I'll bartend at night to do that job. I will do whatever it takes. And how do you not love enthusiasm like that, where people are willing to just go reckless abandon, and then it turns into the career. Brian Tetta, you know, he's the EP on The View now. You know, you think about, you know, Kellison and all the things that he has done, the fun things that he's done, and Tommy as well. Tommy's doing things as well. You know, the experiences he's gotten. I love that, and it inspires me. And I think that other people out there should look at that example with humility, of course, and an openness to learning, and to be to sit at the foot of these people who have been there beforehand and actually take the advice or the opportunity. Kellison talked about how he does this for his people now. You basically threw out the idea of, hey, come see me. If you want to look at something or grow or whatever it is, come see me. And I'm here for you. And he said 2 people took you up on that. And he was one of them. And I love that you're that guy, especially in an industry where many times the writers or the head writers or things like that can be stereotyped as closed or not that person. You, it seems, have made a career of being that person for people. Is that something? Where did you get that from? Where did you get the idea of wanting to lend a hand to those coming up?
Well, I don't know about the lending the hand in there. I think I may be not so scary seeming or forbidding. So I am the ninth of 10 kids. With an identical twin. So there was a certain amount of social brokerage that I was kind of used to from the get-go. And also a big Irish family, a certain amount of verbal banter that was helpful, and a sense of humor. I did, you know, I spent several years as a freelance writer, mailing articles and cartoons to a million places, getting rejection. You know what it's like to be discouraged. And even there's some writers I'm friends with now who go, oh yeah, you called me up when you read my Letterman submission. You didn't give me a job, but you told me you really liked a couple of the things in it. And so they say it to me to kind of like, thanks for nothing, pal. But what they really mean is that they didn't feel like it fell into a abyss and was never heard from again. Yeah. And I know that a little encouragement here and there is what it's all about. And I think comedy writing as well as regular writing, but maybe comedy writing first and foremost, you need some confidence boosts now and then. You need a community and a sounding board and even if it's not an audience exactly, a sort of kindred group where you can feel some support. You go, well, I'm not such a jerk. Though at the same time, you're also listening to them going, oops, they would never, Downey and Merrill and Max and Tom Gamble, Max Fox, these were all people like you wanted to work up to their level, and they would never work with a cliche or toss out a simple reference that would have easily passed muster at most other shows. They wanted to do something that was not like anything else, and not out of vanity, but out of idealism. This is how they wanted to do what they wanted to do. So it's sort of going in all directions, helping others the way you were helped, and understanding that to bring out the best in people, they just need a little sense that there's some appreciation. Appreciation better than money in many cases.
Absolutely.
Not all.
Well, yeah. Now, I think everything at its highest level is philosophy, and this is where it shows that you are a master of your craft, because you can go into the comedy writing of things and talking about what makes a joke work or it doesn't, but then you just so eloquently went into the philosophy of being a comedy writer, and I just appreciate that very much.
Oh my God! Well, I'm enough of a comedy writer to know that when people start talking about the philosophy of comedy writing, most people decide to check out at that point. Like, oh no. I mean, Freud wrote about comedy, and it's the deadliest thing in the world. Almost every essay you read about why we laugh, it's like, but I think it's something you have a sense of, or you don't. But I appreciate all your kind words. But
thank you for saying that. We're gonna get close to bringing it home here. I think you've been gracious with your time and dealing with the power outage and all that. I've got two quick things I want to go into. Well, actually, it's The Simpsons. You wrote one of my very favorite episodes of all time, where everyone goes and joins a cult.
Oh yes, the joy of sect.
The joy of sect.
Yes, it's often confused with several Superior episodes. There's one about a secret society, the Stonecutters, which is kind of like the Masons, way better.
I love that episode as well.
Yeah, I was that a little like my Seinfeld scripts. That was based. Oh, wait, no. Well, I did have to rewrite it massively because between my first draft and my second draft, the Heaven's Gate cult all committed suicide.
Yes.
And it's sad that it would be such a cliche that I could anticipate it handily in my first draft, but I had them with the purple robes and the waiting for the saucer and the whole deal. And so that was weird to have events intercede. Yes. I've always thought there was something funny about lima beans, so I got to get lima beans in there. And I have a handful of lines. Lisa saying, "Dad, you are so suggestible," and Homer saying, "I am so suggestible." But there too, I was a mere passing blip on that show's history. But that was a big fun experience for me to go to a reading and have those voiceover artists saying your lines. I mean, it's like the first time Letterman did one of my monologue jokes. It was several days before I started working on the show, because I was from the square old world where you had to give 2 weeks notice before you left your job.
Yeah.
So Letterman did some monologue jokes. I had included a couple pages of monologue jokes in my package, and he did some. And that feeling of hearing what you wrote being said by someone that you thought the world of, that was something that that I hope everyone who aspires to do it gets that pleasure, because it is as gratifying and satisfying and thrilling as anything I can imagine. Well, almost anything
I right there, that was like the moment I made Dave laugh. That was a little blip moment for me as an enthusiast, working for him and actually having him appreciate, knowing that you got the voice right, and hearing the delivery done right. I can imagine that there might have been times where there might have been miscommunications with certain writers in the delivery, but of whatever, whether it was Dave's or another piece of material by someone else. But when it rings true, I can only imagine the harmony for the soul that would be for a writer. It must be, there's no feeling like it. It's a unique feeling.
Yes.
I would think.
I will mention in a sort of back down to earth way that I have several dozen notes from Dave scribbled on the actual typewritten pages of jokes where he did a joke and it did not go well, or there was some unforeseen turn of events. Like I remember he did a joke of mine one night about Karen Carpenter, and the next day she was dead. And he circled the joke and said, "I hope you're happy, Steve." Like, I didn't. Anyway, in the right atmosphere, a failure can be as funny as a success. And that's definitely something we took to heart at all of the various Letterman incarnations.
Yeah, they talk about how the show, one of the shorthands about late night is that they celebrate failure. I think that's a little bit too harsh of a critique. I think they celebrated real life is what it was, whereas Johnny was show business,
yes.
The veneer, the shiny veneer of everything, and they opened a window to it. I think you guys celebrated real life in the deconstruction of the talk show. I get that, and that rings true for me. The celebrating failure part, and talking about the idea of abandoning that when moving over to late show, I don't necessarily, that doesn't ring as true for me. To me, it was more like regular life, and okay, yeah, we got to get a little bit more like Johnny now. But still celebrating regular life, of course, was the hallmark. So I can't wait to have somebody to do a bit of a tribute on Larry Bud Melman. So I want to go to Ask Mr. Melman. Was Ask Mr. Melman something that you worked on very much?
I created some versions of it, like the Ask the Big Man, where we built the gigantic body for him. I think that was Merrill, kind of, just to ask Mr. Melman. And we also, the idea of writing answers to be given back. We would experiment with even writing lines for audience members.
Yes.
They would tell their brush with greatness story, and then there would be a writer's enhancement that would follow it.
Absolutely.
There was some part of it, and if you worked on the show, you might sense sometimes the Ask Mr. Melman pieces and the audience pieces were to buy us a day because we needed time to finish something in the edit room or production piece. I won't say they were easy. They took plenty of effort and sweat and worry. You were always with the flop sweats. But usually when we saw an audience piece or a Ask Mr. Melman or Ask whoever, we knew we were buying a day or so.
Right.
Which you still tried to make it as silly and bright as you could, but the failure, it's not so much celebrating failure, but failure being as good in its way as success. I'll say I did a piece on the Bonnie Hunt show in which it was like it was going to be good no matter what happened. It was Magic Mondays, where we would have a kid come on every Monday and do a magic trick.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I went and looked at professional kid magicians who were way too good.
Yes.
They were just way too good. So then we just decided, have the cameraman or the sound man or the prop person bring their kid on. We'll give them a trick. They'll sort of learn it, and then they'll do it in front of the camera. But it was ideal because if it worked, it was great. And if it didn't work, it was even better because it was so adorable, So that's what you want to do. You want to find something where you can get it coming and going.
Let's do a quick shout out to Madeline Smithberg right now.
Yes.
Because there's a gal who you talk about what you just spoke about. Boy, did she encompass in the folks that she would find to bring on late night, who basically exemplified everything you're just talking about right now.
The discovery she made in what they call the human interest area, which doesn't begin to explain how quirky and spectacular those things could be. And
Absolutely.
She continued well into the internet era, but her original research for years, she was just combing through small town papers and obscure magazines and word of mouth and wonderful. And also just one of those things where she was on the right wavelength. You would sometimes see talent bookers come and go who'd worked on the Today Show or they'd worked on Good Morning America or something, and all they knew was who's on People magazine kind of thing.
Sure.
But she really got what the sense of humor was with the show, and was in a Merrill Marco, George Meyer,
Yep.
Jim Downey kind of way, a one of the flag carriers or standard bearers, or banner wavers. How else could I put this? Of the late night.
Absolutely.
So,
and shout out to Madeline right now with everything she's going through, and love, and so much love to you, Madeline, from us here, all of us here right now with everything you're going through. God damn it, I didn't get to Jim Downey. Okay, so here's the thing, Steve, after a normal or a reasonable amount of time, and making sure no lawyers have to get involved on anything, and that we're okay to pop our heads out of the foxhole, would you please come back on this show and we can talk about things like Jim Downey?
Oh, yes. Sort of well, yes. And I would also recommend so many other people. Just in the Melman area, you should have Steve Weiner and Carl Tiedemann, who discovered him and used him in a student film. And that was a big step.
You have already off camera, and now that it's on camera, you have to be held to it. No, I'm just kidding. You have said you have basically opened the door to introductions and things like that. It could not be more appreciated. Thank you for that. Those are, yes, I would love to have them on. I definitely want to tribute some of the folks that can't relive the memories anymore because they're not here anymore. And of course, Mr. DeForest or Larry Bud Melman. I mean, yes, we have to do that. Next time you come on, we can talk about Jim Downey, and that I have tremendous reputational respect for him as well. I'm right up there with you. You, of course, a nose ahead because, he went back to SNL and did his thing. You stayed, and so many things you came up with. There are so many things I could ask you about. We're going to go to the top 10. I'm going to try and make it different than any other time that you've talked about the top 10 list. I'm going to truncate. People say, hey, where did you get the idea for the top 10 list? And many times it's the same response. Well, it was an easy thing. It created itself. This is a mocking of media pieces at the time. I was a Canadian. I have a different, totally different conspiracy theory about the top 10 list. I don't believe it had anything to do with this other crap about magazines putting out 10 lists. I believe that this is a government conspiracy that you guys were going to switch over to the metric system, and they were using you as a delivery method to switch things over to the metric system, and that's where the top.
Wait, aren't we already in a base 10 number system?
I don't know. I'm a Canadian. You tell me.
I think it was just a handy framework in which you could do 10 jokes, and because you could pretend it was existing in some independent framework, and you weren't really responsible for the success or failure. People often ask about the origin of it, and it is one of those things where there's about 6 people that get hats off for it for this single afternoon, from Downey himself, who did a very similar spirited thing on the new show. Kevin Curran, who wrote the very first one, Top 10 Things That Almost Rhyme with Peas. Randy Cohen made the plain suggestion that we do them, and Robert Morton did the same. Yep. I was very keen on it as well. But I think it's one of those things we're always looking for repeatables, which were something you could do over and over again, street footage or crazy new product items or something. And when the top 10 list, when we were joking over it, the idea of whose idea it was, it's kind of like a bunch of people on a desert island and a crate full of food washes up on shore. Whose idea is it to eat the food? So the top 10 list kind of just sprang from various mothers and fathers.
Okay. And speaking of mothers and fathers in the top 10 list, these, when I was a child, 2 things that ended up being in my stocking at Christmas. The stocking, of course, the device at 6:30 in the morning to allow the parents to sleep in till about 8 in the morning, if possible, if done correctly. Of course, putting a book inside the stocking helped prolong that time before the kids would go and jump on top of mom and dad's stomachs while they were in mid-sleep. These are 2 items that appeared in my stockings, both of them, of course, by David Letterman and Steve O'Donnell. Very, cool.
And all the writers and all the writers.
I know,
No,
but that's not what it
there's
says
a
on the
photograph of
letterhead.
my dad's bowling team in there. Yeah. Okay.
David
Yes.
Letterman and Steve O'Donnell, though. That
Well,
you
just
got
because
top billing.
I edited the books and I put together the photos and also the introductions. I think in the second volume 2, is that Roman volume 2?
This is Roman numeral 2. Yes.
I think there's a photograph of my dad's bowling team somewhere in the middle there.
Really?
The Clifford T. Bell biography, the completely disembodied and not associated with anything else biography of Clifford Bell. And there's
that looks like this guy right here. I think we're looking up in the top corner here.
One more page. The bowling team. It's a bowling team. It's like 6 guys in bowling uniforms. Come on, Canada bowls.
That was it. Oh my
or do they call it kegling?
The bodyguards.
Try the page before.
No, but we need to make that happen though. We definitely need to turn it into that.
Maybe,
you can tell there's no pre-interview here.
Hand.
The Memphis bell embroidered.
That's it. The Mafia.
That's it right there. Yep, there it is.
Yep, that's my dad's bowling team.
Oh my God, look at that. Immortalized.
And the one that looks sort of like me is my dad.
Immortalized and under some Canadian kid's Christmas tree, in the stocking. Now there's a phenomenal. Even today, I look at this and it's just it holds up, and that's the thing about what you guys did. It holds up. It stands the test of time, even through the political correctness times that we have here. Yes, some things are a little bit don't translate as well, but oh my God, does this stuff ever translate? I got to ask you about one of the forewords in this book, and then we can go home. One of the acknowledgments in the book, because we also need somebody to do. Shecky won't come on and do it, but we need to have someone tribute Jack Rollins as well. And so let's talk about Jack Rollins for a second.
Oh yes, he was quite a wonderful man, quite unlike anyone else. A sweet character from another era who was just the greatest, he was full of malapropisms and so on. It was just the most wonderful thing. And a beloved, talk about a friend of writers. He really liked writers in comics and was very encouraging to them. And also just one of these old time guys who loved going to the track, harness racing, the ponies, thoroughbreds, whatever. He was from that old school, in a great lovable way.
Again, we go with The Godfather, characters in The Godfather, and the characteristics of. Now, obviously, you guys weren't organized crime, that has been proven, but at the same time, the characters that you all were, that's where I use that. I use that all the time. That analogy. Jack Rollins, of course, a character by reputation only from me, by anecdote from you, that definitely has that character that you all had in his own unique way. I love that. In the book here, the last acknowledgement, and a special thanks to Mr. Rollins for letting us use all the old lumber behind his garage.
Oh, yes. Well, yes, I was thinking of Mr. Greathouse, who I grew up on West 95th Street in Cleveland. He used to let us use the old lumber behind his. Yeah, there were a lot of little toss-offs like that.
This was your joke. That was your joke.
Yes,
that was my question, and that was the one that
I'm not sure Jack Rollins himself got it though, but who knows? Well, all right. Well, is that our good nights? Is that our farewells?
Is there anything else? Is there anything else you wanted to say? Actually, the only other thing that I was going to say is, did you want to say anything about your brother before I?
Oh yes. By the way, another to mention Don Giller again.
Yes, sir.
My twin brother appeared on the Letterman show a couple of times whenever we needed like an identical twin switcheroo gag.
Yeah.
And in the last weeks of the show, had been making a pest of myself. Can I get a copy? I have almost no copies of anything I ever wrote on the show, but now I can find them somewhere if I have to. And if I could remember vaguely the title and roughly the year. Yeah. But there was a piece where Mark and I emerged from a cloning booth, each clutching a $20 bill to give back to Dave. There was a bit where we were separated at birth, and I'm trying to find my twin brother in the audience. Anyway, it was very, very fun to see my twin. I asked Don Giller if he could find those for me. He had them posted in about 10 minutes.
Yep.
Online. Yes.
Yep.
Again, to talk about Letterman's generosity, he gave my brother Mark a nice blurb on his first book. My brother Mark was an author and a playwright. Eventually, he got a Tony Award for um, for the book of the musical Hairspray. And if you're old enough, you'll understand I had this joke about, now you know which twin has the Tony. And yes, he was, and he was, it was enough of a kind of a family organization that he could drop by the office and come and go, and people got a kick out of him, like, oh, hey, Mark, how's everything going? It was very weird at Kimmel, where which was in California, and Mark remained in New York. Yep. So I was working at Kimmel 2 or 3 years before Mark came to visit. And at that point, the rest of the staff had gotten to know me very well. Yep. So when this doppelganger shows up who looks very much like me, they all oohed and ahed like he was the first white man on New Guinea. You know, they just patting his head, you know, like, oh, weird.
Shout out to the Swiss Family Robinson on that, by the way.
Yes. Anyway, yes, my twin, a hilarious writer. He did several stretches at Saturday Night Live, but he did not like all the collaborations and compromises of television. He liked writing essays, writing articles, writing plays, writing novels, and he wrote many, many, many of each of those things, and was very good looking.
Thank you for talking about him, and I didn't prep you for that either. Not that I prepped you for really any of this, but I wanted to. I
knew something was coming with Shecky. I knew that.
That was okay. Yeah, that was a little bit. Beautiful that you talked about him again and talking about him in your speech. We lost him in 2012.
Yes, so it's been a decade.
Yeah, good to talk about him right now. And think about him right now. Thank you for opening yourself up to talking about him and everything. And yeah, we're gonna go home now. We've got it on digital zeros and one videotape that you are going to be coming back, and I appreciate that.
My favorite type.
I can't thank you enough, and I'm not going to embarrass you anymore, I promise. Thank you so much for doing this. The hand up thing that you did for Daniel Kellison and all these other people, you've done it for me already. I can't thank you enough for this. And again, like I alluded to in one of the emails that I sent, it was during a time of my life where the pathways of my brain were forming and being created. I thank you and I blame you for how they have turned out. Because you and the clever words, whether it was the words that Mr. Melman spoke or the zany things and concepts that happened, shaped me into the odd human that I am right now. And I say that with every bit of sincerity and gratitude, sir. Thank you so much, Steve.
The windmills of your mind. Well,
let's go chase them.
No, it's been my pleasure. Well, we share a pleasure and a joy in the Letterman project, and I understand it. So anyway, thank you for having me. It was fun to talk with you.
All right. Well, let's. Thank you for saying that.
Now I'll start reaching for the right button on the,
almost. You just got to sit through one last little thing, and that's me saying that is another episode. There it is, right there. We're gonna do the outro with him on here. Yeah, y'all know. I think you all know. I think it translates well. What a kick this was. I hope that this was a kick for you all as well as we build this community that passes the torch of that. Again, the cliche, it's becoming cliche because I say it so often, the greatest body of broadcasting work in history. And there is one of the architects of it right there, Steve O'Donnell, who has helped so many, and ourselves included, when it comes to being entertained through our lives. That is another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you very much for being a part of this. Until the next time that we talk, thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.